Hi, I'm Charles Feldman, and welcome to the year-end edition of SOS America. And for those of you who have been watching or listening to our episodes for the past few months, I want to give you a very heartfelt thank you for going along on this journey. It's not by any means over. We will have a lot of new information, lots more in terms of the guests that we're going to have, that we're planning to have in 2026. So, SOS America, of course, will be continuing. So, if you have subscribed, you can still look forward to a new episode every 2 weeks. If you haven't subscribed, it's free. So, it's not that hard. Just like take your finger and, click on the thing that says subscribe. And before you know it, we will show up on your computer, on your phone, or wherever you would like it to show up. Um, I do hope you've enjoyed the episodes. We've had some interesting feedback over the past few months. We do appreciate it. We certainly read it, and in some cases, when we can, we will, of course, respond. So keep that coming in. It is of great value to us. I can assure you of that. Um, Today's episode is going to be a little different. Well, actually, a lot different, to be quite honest, because as you know, if you've watched SOS America, our format is we have a guest every episode, sometimes, two guests, and we talk about what's happening currently in the United States, and we try to make the topics so that they're of interest to people here in the U.S., where obviously where I am, but also for people, viewers, listeners who might be outside of the United States who are wondering, they're scratching their heads and they're going, "What the hell is actually happening in the United States?" Because it's different, and it is primarily because of the current administration in Washington, the Trump administration. And that, again, is not to say whether, Donald Trump is good or bad. It's just a fact that things have changed. And many of the guests that we've had on SOS America do take the position that much of the change is not good. And we'll explore some of that in the next few minutes as well. So, the reason why we're not going to have a guest on this particular episode is because we thought it would be a good time to sort of collect our thoughts as we are on the threshold of the holiday season, and kind of look back a little bit and maybe look forward a little bit to whatever degree we can try to be clairvoyant. Um, and hopefully this will be something that you will find of interest.
Good evening, America. 11 months ago, I inherited a mess, and I'm fixing it.
So, I've been saying that the United States has changed a lot. And, if you are a news junkie, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. Maybe you're not a news junkie, and that's okay. It's fine. You can, everybody has their own thing. And SOS America simply says that we have a problem in the United States. And it is a problem that not only affects people here in the US, but clearly affects people all over the world because, we're a big player, probably maybe along with, not maybe, along with China, I would suspect nowadays. Economically, we're one of the two biggest players in the globe, on the globe. And politically, we certainly know how to throw our weight around, and I'll get to that as well in the next few minutes. So we have a problem. And some people in the United States think that while we have issues, that the current leadership, again, Donald Trump, is just what the doctor ordered, that it was time to, Trump used to say, clean the swamp.
That's what we're doing. We're doing it.
Whatever the hell that means, but that it was time to do that. And so those people, um, they applaud what is happening in Washington. And, they have their point of view. And I respect their point of view. And actually, if you're a listener or a viewer to this, you should respect their point of view as well. People, when it comes to politics, do tend to have different ways of looking at things. And, not everybody is right and not everybody is wrong. There's a kernel of truth in everybody's viewpoint. And then there are people who think that what is currently happening in the United States is an unmitigated disaster because some very fundamental concepts of what it is to be the United States of America is clearly are clearly shifting. And for example, the role that the United States has played in the so-called world order since World War II, that appears to be shifting. The role the United States plays in the economic sphere of the world, that appears to be shifting with Mr. Trump's imposition of tariffs. That was something that was anathema to most economists and certainly most other nations, and still is. And yet, Mr. Trump feels that that is the way to go, is to slap these horrendous tariffs on goods and services coming into the United States from other countries. Um, and then maybe the more important thing, maybe it's the most important thing, is a lot of people detect what they feel has been a moral shift in the United States. That there were certain um, uh, concepts. Again, I'm trying to find a better word than concepts, but certain ways that the United States has always been viewed, that we were a nation that had a moral compass, and that while we had disagreements among ourselves as Americans, and we had disagreements perhaps with people in other parts of the world, our moral compass, nevertheless, was fixed. We had a fundamental sense of what was right and a fundamental sense of what was wrong in the world. Now that seems to be turned upside down and inside out. And it is very difficult to determine exactly what our moral compass is. It's kind of like, when you have a compass sometimes and you have some magnetic interference and the needle kind of keeps spinning around and it doesn't get fixed on magnetic north, that kind of thing. So that's kind of the way some people feel. It's a dizzying and troubling effect.
The scariest episode in the nuclear age was resolved basically because the American leaders decided to act in the best moral tradition of the country. And today we have a leader who appears to lack a moral compass.
So, would this podcast exist? And I've had that question posed to me too. Would we be doing this podcast if Donald Trump was not elected for the second time president of the United States? Fair question. The answer emphatically is no, we wouldn't. But Donald Trump is president of the United States. And the second time around for him has been dramatically different than the first time around when he was in the White House. This was, pre the, I call it kind of the Biden sandwich, right? You had Joe Biden in the middle, and you had Trump on one end, and now you have Trump back on the other end. Donald Trump is a politician who is transactional. What do I mean by transactional? Um, I don't think he really has a moral compass, like I was just talking about. I think he does what he thinks is expedient for him, what he thinks is expedient for his family. And I think third and last, what is expedient for the people of the United States. And that's my own opinion. And I'm sure that there are many people who are going to watch this who will disagree with that. But that's my opinion. Why do I say all of that? Well, you can probably look at one single event that will tell you that Donald Trump has a um, out of whack, and I'm being kind kind here, I guess, an out of whack moral compass. And that is the very sad and horrific events that led to the murder of Rob Reiner and his wife, Michele, in their Brentwood, California home, allegedly by their own child, by one of their children, their son, who is now in custody and charged with 2 counts of premeditated murder. And, I don't think there's anybody watching this unless you've been in I don't know, like a 20-year coma or longer than that, and are now just emerging, who doesn't, of course, know who Rob Reiner was, both as an actor first and then as a renowned director and producer, but mostly director of some classic films that I dare say probably most of us have seen if we were or are moviegoers. Um, and of course, Rob Reiner, especially in this country, in the US, has also been known as a political activist. Not everybody in Hollywood is like that. Some do their thing and they shy away from the world of politics. That was not the case with Rob Reiner. I used to do a radio program here in LA. I actually had the pleasure a couple of years back of having Rob Reiner in the studio with me to do a show, and then subsequently talk to him only a couple of times after that on the phone. And I found him to be two things: a sort of walking encyclopedia of show business, which you can imagine he would be, because of course he comes from showbiz family, his father having been Carl Reiner, who, years back was, one of the writers for classic 1950s and 60s television shows in the U.S. and creator of when it went on to be the Dick Van Dyke Show. So he's sort of was Hollywood royalty, if you will. So he was, I thought, a walking encyclopedia of showbiz, but he was also very astute when it came to politics. He understood how politics worked. He understood what needed to be done to expedite things. He was somebody who had his own moral compass, his own sense of what was right and what is wrong. If you see the film A Few Good Men, which he directed, while he didn't write that it was not written by him, but he was the director of that film. You have little clues about where he thought the United States should be in what the characters were saying, what the Jack Nicholson character was saying, what the Tom Cruise character was saying, that sort of thing. So you had, I think, a pretty good understanding that Rob Reiner, in his own life, had a real good sense of what was right and what was wrong. So, what does this all have to do with Donald Trump? You may be asking. Well, and here's where I advance my own thinking that Donald Trump's moral compass is out of whack. So after the news broke of the death, tragic death of Rob Reiner and his wife, Michele, as one would expect, there was a lot of reaction, excuse me, from not only Hollywood types, that would be expected, but political types. Because as I mentioned, Rob Reiner was somebody who was very active in politics. He raised a lot of money for the Democratic Party. He was friends, excuse me, with everyone from Bill and Hillary Clinton to Barack and Michelle Obama. In fact, by the way, interesting fact here is that on the very day, it was a Sunday, of course, that the bodies of Rob Reiner and his wife were discovered by one of their children, by their daughter. We learned subsequent to that, that later that day, Barack Obama, former President Obama, and the former First Lady Michelle Obama were supposed to be visiting him. They were going to be here in Los Angeles, and they were scheduled to actually, meet with him, probably have, I don't know, I guess dinner or whatever they were planning to do. And of course, that sadly didn't occur. But of course, the Obamas then, as the Clintons did, released the appropriate statements of condolence that one would expect of political leadership. And then there's Donald Trump, the President of the United States. Now, sure, there had been great personal animosity over the years between Donald Trump and Rob Reiner. I mean, again, Rob Reiner was a political activist. He campaigned and contributed huge amounts of money and helped get huge amounts of money for the Clintons when Bill Clinton was running, for Barack Obama when Obama was running, for Hillary Clinton when she was running, and for Joe Biden, even for the time when he ran and it ended up being an aborted attempt for reelection because he dropped out, as you know, and Kamala Harris took over that particular campaign and then lost to Donald Trump. So Donald Trump, President of the United States, okay, he doesn't like Rob Reiner. He doesn't have to like Rob Reiner. You don't have to like people in this world. And Rob Reiner didn't like him. I don't know if Rob Reiner didn't like Donald Trump personally. He certainly didn't like him politically.
No, I was not a fan of Rob Reiner at all in any way, shape, or form. I thought he was very bad for our country.
So the President of the United States could have done two things, both of which would have been perfectly acceptable. He could have issued a condolence. He didn't have to praise the guy to high heaven, but he could have said, he was a renowned artist and somebody that many Americans looked up to, and certainly the the films that he made and the TV shows that he was in were things that brought great joy to many people who consumed that. And he could have just issued a statement of condolence and say, this is a horrible thing, and my warmest feelings to the family, that kind of thing. He could have done that. And yeah, I guess some people would say, well, wouldn't that be disingenuous if he didn't like the guy? And yeah, I guess at some level it would be, but sometimes it's okay. Sometimes it's okay to be, if you're a political leader, somewhat disingenuous, because you have to be able to bring people together. And if that's what it takes, then that's what it takes. So that would have been one option he could have used. The other option could have been to say nothing. Now, for Donald Trump to say nothing is, I would contend, pretty much impossible. As I mentioned in some previous episodes, and for those of you who have been watching SOS America or listening to it, you know that this is the case. You know, I knew Donald Trump fairly well in the late 1980s and early 1990s, and he famously or infamously, as the case may be, walked out of an interview that I was doing with him back in 1990, and we've gone into that on a previous episode. And if you're interested in that, by the way, it's available to you. So if you haven't seen it, go back a couple of weeks and you will find the video clip of that, as well as an explanation that I give about what brought that about. So I can attest to the fact that Donald Trump is not somebody who can say nothing about anything, even things he knows nothing about. He is likely to have an opinion of. But nonetheless, that would have been option number two, is to just say nothing. And, you know, actions do speak louder than words sometimes. So not saying anything, he'd get across the fact that he was not a fan of Rob Reiner, but that would have been it. Did Donald Trump choose option one? No. Did Donald Trump choose option two? No. Donald Trump chose option three. What's option three? Well, option three was what I would call classic Donald Trump. Yeah, there was a kind of an obligatory line in the statement he released, you know, expressing, you know, condolences, I suppose. But the gist of Donald Trump's statement was to call names, to, in effect, say that he thought that Rob Reiner was a horrible person, that he thought Rob Reiner was bad for the United States. And he made it, Donald Trump did, a statement less about Rob Reiner and his wife being brutally murdered in their own beds, apparently, in their own home. He made it less about them than he did about Donald Trump. That was the option three, that Donald Trump chose. That, I would contend, perhaps more than anything he has done in all the years collectively that he has now been in the White House, that, I think, alone shows where this person, Donald Trump, stands in the universe, where Donald Trump is coming from, where Donald Trump's own way of thinking is. It's, you know, I've been reading comments since he released that statement in the press here, and people are, even people who know him very, very well, are astonished by his remarks. And not just Democrats, the opposition party, and you would expect them to be, you know, upset by what Donald Trump said about Rob Reiner. But even a few, and it is a few, people in Donald Trump's own party, Republicans, who in effect have said this was inappropriate.
That just crosses every line of just basic human decency.
When people say horrible things about Rob right now, I find it, quite frankly, infuriating.
You can. I don't disagree with you, but it's wrong, and we should be able to call out right and wrong.
This is not what a world leader says about a brutal murder of a well-known American. And even to be quite honest, even a not well-known American, you don't say things like that when you're president of the United States. So that I think is just one example, maybe the best example of what kind of person Donald Trump is. Is he a person that has class? No, not really. Is he a person that is so narcissistic that everything in the world, and I mean everything, is viewed through the prism of his own self, how it impacts him, not how it impacts Americans, not how it impacts others in the world, but how it impacts Donald J. Trump. That's how he views the world. And that apparently is how he governs the United States. Okay, so let's take the Rob Reiner thing now aside. So, what other things have made this country, in my view, and in the view of many of the guests we've had, fundamentally different than it was, say, a year ago? Okay, I can tick them off. For example, the United States is clearly engaged in a sort of military, certainly a political conflict with Venezuela. Why? Why Venezuela? Well, Mr. Trump says that Venezuela is basically a factory for fentanyl. It's not actually. If anything, it's more cocaine from Venezuela than it is fentanyl. But okay, maybe Mr. Trump has got his drugs mixed up. But and that they are, sending boats out on the open sea to deliver these drugs that are killing Americans. And so, Mr. Trump contends, the United States has the right unilaterally, because he says we are battling narco terrorists, to go after them and, as one would do in a war, in combat, kill them, not arrest them, not bring them to a court of justice, not present evidence of their alleged crime, not to have a jury and or a judge decide what, if any, punishment they deserve, but that he and he alone has the authority to bomb these small boats, kill the people who are in these boats. Right now, I think the figure is 80 plus people who have been killed in these attacks in international water, and has proudly said he intends to continue to do that. He's got no authorization from the United States Congress. He says, authorization from legal experts within the White House, but he has not made public the people who have given him that advice, nor has he published the written opinions that one presumably would imagine they would have given him to say, hey, Mr. President, what you're doing is perfectly legal. But he's doing it anyway. And he's doing it apparently for two reasons. Reportedly, one, he would like the current leadership in Venezuela to leave. Why? Why does Donald Trump care who's governing Venezuela? Well, there was an interesting article the other day in the New York Times about what Trump is really after: oil, Venezuela is the largest, has some of the largest oil, may even be the largest. I haven't checked that, but it's certainly one of the largest oil reserves on the planet. And the thinking is, among some, that what this is really all about is that if Donald Trump can so intimidate the current president of Venezuela as to get him to step down or leave, then the United States could end up, in effect, having the oil from Venezuela, make it our own. And in fact, Trump has said that. The other day, he seized one ship that was carrying oil. Now, he says it's because it's a ship in the past that was delivering oil to Iran, and it was under sanctions, so that would make it illegal. May or may not be true nowadays because this is going back a few years. But what Trump is saying is that because of that, the United States has the right to seize the oil. And when he was asked by reporters, what happens to that oil? It's not ours. We didn't buy it. We didn't produce it. It didn't come out of the ground in the United States. His response was, well, I guess we keep it. Words to that effect. I guess we'd keep it. Why not? Why not keep everything we can seize? Is that the United States? Is that what our guiding ethic is, that seize whatever we can get? Be the new colonial power on the planet and just kind of march in and do. Now, you can argue we've done that in the past, certainly. I mean, the United States is certainly not a virgin when it comes to interfering in governments around the world. We have a long and somewhat ignoble history of doing things like that, especially in our own hemisphere, in Central and South America, in particular, but also in places like Iran back in the 1950s and 60s, where we were certainly very active, clandestinely at the time, certainly, but very active in regime change in places like Iran. So this is a change in how the United States functions. So that's another one that gives you a clue about why we are different. Immigration. We had another very interesting episode of SOS America. And again, I invite you to go back and listen or watch it if you are interested in this topic. And we talked to people about immigration. We talked about how people, the new policy that Donald Trump has in terms of he thinks, he wants to rid the United States of people who he says arrived here illegally and who have a criminal background. Well, okay, to that degree, no one's going to argue with that. I mean, people shouldn't come into the United States illegally. And if they have a criminal background, then yes, they shouldn't be, roaming the streets, potentially committing crimes in the United States. They should be booted out. But the statistics show that that has not always been the case, that very often people have been caught up in these dragnets who not only are in the country legally, but in some cases, they're actually U.S. citizens. They were born here. But because of the color of their skin, or because they often speak another language, they were targeted and, at least for a time, were apprehended and kept in custody by federal agents until eventually they were released. But nonetheless, creating, as you can imagine, an enormous psychological as well as physical disturbance for that person and that person's family. So the whole issue of immigration has clearly changed the way the United States is perceived around the world. And of course, there are people in the United States who feel much the same way. And again, you can go back and our very first episode was on whether or not the United States is now following its own constitution. And we did an interview with a very renowned constitutional expert. So I invite you to look at that episode as well. So that's pretty much the reasoning behind SOS America. And I think that we've got, for next year, 2026, some good guests lined up. I do hope that you have enjoyed these episodes, that you have at least found them of interest. If you have, by all means, share it, tell your friends, subscribe. It's perfectly free. But at this point, I will wish all of the viewers and listeners to SOS America a very happy and healthy and financially fruitful holiday season and a very happy new year. And we will see you again in 2026. Until then, for SOS America, I'm Charles Feldman. Thank you.